Epic Mickey Rebrushed has just recently released, and I have to admit that as I sit here writing this review, a great conflict is occurring inside of me. Epic Mickey was originally a collectathon 3D platformer with some light action and RPG elements released on the Nintendo Wii back in 2010, and it was beloved by some, but received a fairly large amount of criticism at the time. From what I can see online, it stemmed mostly from a poor camera and bad controls. As a wee 15-year-old at the time, I unfortunately missed out on playing Epic Mickey, and it has always been on my list of games I wanted to play one day, so when I heard this remake was coming out, I couldn't have been more excited. I'm telling you all of this so that you know there is no nostalgia bias going into this review, and I will be reviewing Epic Mickey Rebrushed as its own original title without a focus on comparison to the original release of the game. So the question is, with developer Purple Lamp doing a traditional remake here with Rebrushed, how is it? As I said earlier, I feel quite conflicted in my answer, so let's go part by part here. First of all, what is the game about, and how is the story? Epic Mickey Rebrushed is an entirely faithful but also improved remake that keeps all of the original content preserved but improves on some of the weaker or more aged things about the original game. If you loved Epic Mickey, then you're gonna love Rebrushed, and if you never played it like I didn't, then you'll find a charming platformer with a strong theme of legacy, nostalgia, and love for classic animation. This is meant to be a more grown-up and darker story about the titular Disney hero Mickey Mouse and the long-lost cartoon mascot Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. As a younger and still more mischievous lad, Mickey finds himself transported into Yensid's workshop where he finds a small world of Yensid's creation. The tiny world called Wasteland is a land made up of both paint and thinner, housing all the lost and forgotten Disney characters and worlds that have been forgotten as the decades have gone on. Through a series of unfortunate incidents, Mickey is thrown into this world meant to be about love for the cartoons of yore, only to find it a destroyed and chaotic land which has been overrun by the Blot, an inky monster and its minions that are altering the land. Mickey will have to choose whether he'll save this broken and forgotten world and its inhabitants through the power of paint, or whether he'll give in to his more naughty nature and wreak havoc as he goes with his powers of control over thinner. Epic Mickey Rebrushed tries to tell a more grown-up story for Mickey with moral choice on how you approach level progression, side quests, and main story choices. But narratively, this falls flat most of the time due to the fact that not a single line of dialogue in the game is voiced, and choices made during side quests not having any tangibly different outcomes, meaning that nothing really feels like it has any gravitas or meaning. Cutscenes about loss and despair and hope all amount to nothing when you're sitting there looking at a silent screen with text for minutes on end. The side quests and side content are massively affected by the loss of any sort of emotional depth. Fetch quests given to Mickey by the various NPCs in the game are immediately forgettable and uninspiring due to the fact that the writing is so plain and the delivery so bland that I never feel like the people urgently need my help, or that there's any sense of fulfillment for having done them. This also tarnishes the more adult vision that was intended for the game, as without any emotional depth, the game ends up feeling more Saturday morning cartoon than it does grown-up story about childhood Disney icon. I do really like the intention behind the story here. I like the fact that this game sets out to have moral choices played out by your gameplay and quest decisions, and how it does shoot for a slightly older audience. But unfortunately, so much of the intended tone is lost from these shortcomings, and it makes the story go from an eagerly anticipated experience to one of the biggest chores on offer here. While I do appreciate the vision that was intended with the story, and the fact that the outcome for the residents of Wasteland can be tailored to your own unique story here, I do really feel like adding in voice acting would help to improve the overall quality of both the main story and the side content, and maybe help to not make the side content feel more like filler than meaningful additions to go alongside the main plot. I do truly love that the way you play this game impacts not only what happens to the world, but the stories that will happen within it as well. So let's get into the gameplay. As you take young Mickey on his adventure to save Wasteland, you'll be tackling 4 main components of gameplay. First will be the main 3D platforming levels, second being Mickey's powers to control both paint and thinner to influence the world and solve puzzles, third being combat, and last being the 2D platformer levels taking place between the main 3D platformer ones. Starting off with what is the absolute core of the game, the main 3D platformer levels will have you doing a lot of jumping around, so it's a good thing that the game feels nice and responsive, and Mickey is given a fairly generously sized jump. Mickey's running speed might be a little slow for my tastes, but thankfully we have a sprint button here that makes backtracking through old areas a little less of a pain. In these main levels, you'll be spending a lot of your time looking for plenty of things to collect, from the main currency, which is movie tickets to trade in at shops, to concept art from the game's development to any and all items relating to completing side quests for the residents of Wasteland. The main way you'll be looking for all these things is by utilising what is probably Epic Mickey Rebrushed's most unique part of the gameplay, which is Mickey's ability to shoot out either paint or thinner. This is about as straightforward as it sounds. Shoot paint at missing things in the environment to make them exist again, and shoot thinner at others to make them go away. This straightforward feature actually adds a lot to the gameplay loop here, having the player always thinning down walls and floors to make sure that there aren't any items or collectibles missed behind them. The paint and thinner mechanics also play a huge role in both the way that the player interacts with level progression, but also the morality path that the player will take Mickey Mouse on. Will you thin down the supports on a large tower to make it fall and create a bridge over a poisonous river? Or will you find a more complex path, filling in ramps to build your own little side passage to the same destination? These are the choices that the player will make over and over again as they play through the main levels. Level progression and puzzles aren't the only way you'll be using paint and thinner, as they're also the main part of your combat toolkit. Along the way, you'll be fighting 2 main kinds of enemies in Wasteland, the first being little blotlings, which are the spawn of the blot itself, and the other type of enemies being evil animatronics. Each main group of enemies has several different types within their ranks, and at first it seems like the game does a great job with enemy variety, but the illusion starts to fade once you figure out that every single enemy is defeated by one of 3 ways. You either shoot paint at it until it turns good, shoot thinner at it until it disappears, or thin out its outer layer and then hit it with your spin attack. There are technically other moves available here. Mickey has a jumping slam he can do, and a dash, both of which I personally never found any use for, and he also has a couple of more artistic moves at his disposal. Sketches are little things Mickey can summon, but these do not have a wide variety at all, and just work as a one-hit kill for enemies. As you choose whether you use more paint to fill in things in the world or thinner to make them go away, you'll also be filling a bar underneath your health, which when full, will let you use a little wisp-like ability that is also just a one-shot to defeat any enemy. On paper, the combat seems like something with a lot of variety and depth to it, but once you get hands-on, the actuality of it is so simple that you're going to be very bored of combat before you even hit the halfway mark of the game. One thing that Epic Mickey Rebrushed does very well is the boss battles, even if they're maybe not as plentiful as I would have liked. Boss battles have this really fun mix between platforming, puzzle solving, and utilising your paint or thinner abilities depending on what kind of Mickey you prefer to play as, and I really like the fact that so much choice was able to be put into them when a lot of the time boss battles in RPGs are the one part lacking in different ways of executing them. As I said earlier, there are also quite a few 2D platformer levels that occur between the main 3D ones, and personally, I liked these. They're very charming and almost all have a very classic Disney animation style to them that reminds me of a cross between the run and gun levels from Cuphead and the timeless river world from Kingdom Hearts 2. These levels aren't too difficult, and only last usually between 2 and 5 minutes each, so they don't overstay their welcome. Plus, they feature their own special collectible film reels that can be traded into an NPC for rewards such as alternate outfits for our main hero that harken back to outfits in classic Mickey Mouse animations. Now I'm going to circle back to talking about the side quests again, because not only are they lacking narratively, but also feel uninspired when it comes to their gameplay. Almost all side quests in the game are basic fetch quests. Kill X amount of enemies in this level, collect this item while in that level, thin out or paint a specific object in the next level. This isn't helped by the fact that almost all of the side content in the game is missable. Go a bit too far into a level and you can't go back anymore, so that item you were meant to collect for old Bessie back in town? Well, you're gonna have to let her down now, aren't you? NPCs also don't have any indication whether they have a quest available or if they relate to a current one of yours, so unless you talk to every NPC multiple times over and move at a snail's pace, then you're almost guaranteed to fail or miss some quests here and there. Personally, it's a huge pet peeve of mine to have missable content in games, so I'm not a fan of this at all, and it's just another reason that I only did a little bit of the side content here and there, when in most games, I would try to do almost all of it before beating the game. So I've been quite critical of both the story and the gameplay so far, but how about the design of the game? The main levels themselves are a bit polarizing for me personally. I love the variety here between spooky castles, poison swamps, pirate ships, and future factories, and the way the levels look is absolutely gorgeous visually. But the level design with how the levels are laid out and how they play can be a bit bland at times. I do think the level design gets significantly better the further into the game you get from both a visual perspective and a level layout perspective. I can't stress enough just how absolutely gorgeous this game is. I played through it on my PS5 at a buttery smooth 4K 60 FPS, and between the wonderful art style, fun level designs, and how well done everyone's animations are, it always felt so satisfying to be playing. I do think that some of the levels can drag on at times, mostly the levels leading up to getting to the hub world, but the game does a decent job of adding in little objectives and extra things here and there to keep the flow going and always make the player want to move on to the next moment. While I do give 2 massive thumbs up to everything in the game involving anything to do with the art, unfortunately I can't say the same for the score. The soundtrack here is probably my biggest disappointment, and that really saddens me to say because I feel like a game like this is just so ripe for a really fun and inspired soundtrack. Aside from the 2D side-scroller levels, it never really felt like the soundtrack was matching the tone of the game, and almost all of the time just felt a little too mellow or low energy. This was especially noticeable in the final few arcs of the game where the characters are talking about going and doing the big finale stuff with no voice acting and music that feels like it could have played over any of the first 3 hours worth of levels. There's no sense of scale, no sense of escalation, no real sense of strong emotion in the music, and it brings the tone of the whole game down with it. This remake might also be gorgeous visually and run really well, but it released here in Australia with a $100 price tag, which is more than what God of War 2018, Ghosts of Tsushima, and Final Fantasy VII Remake cost at launch, and the gulf of quality and production value between games like those and this game is honestly staggering. There is absolutely no way in this world that Epic Mickey Rebrushed is worth a $100 price tag. If it had launched at like $70 Australian dollars, which is your average Nintendo Switch release price, then I might not have been so negative in my critique, but if you want to have a top dollar game, then I'm going to judge it as so. Now that we're about to move on to the finale for the review, if you've made it this far, scroll down just a little there and hit that subscribe button so that you can stay up to date on all things involving game reviews. Now, on to the finale. I know what you're probably thinking, that this review seems super negative and surely I hated the game, right? You'd actually be quite wrong there. I actually liked Epic Mickey Rebrushed a lot and did really enjoy my time with it. I think that this game brings a lot of unique ideas to the table, not only for a Disney game, but for a 3D platformer in general. The paint and thinner mechanic that is used on anything from traversal to puzzle solving to combat, all the way to a morality system influenced not by dialogue and choices, but by how you choose to interact with the world itself, the enemies, and what routes you take for your side quests make this game feel like something I truly haven't played before, which is really rare when you know how many games I have beaten. I respect this game a lot for really going for it and trying to be the biggest and best game it can be, but this is also the game's biggest flaw. Since it's trying to do so much and be so genuinely epic of a game, it unfortunately falls one step short on nearly everything. There are so many aspects that are merely good in Epic Mickey Rebrushed when they are so close to being great. The level design is gorgeous, but layouts can be bland. Combat is inventive and there are many enemy types, but they all get defeated the same way. The game has a lot of systems on offer, but everything is way too easy. Side content is plentiful, but it's not interesting or meaningful. There are so many things I like about this game that I just wish were that little bit better, and if they were, I could see this being an all-time favourite of mine. I promise I do still like Epic Mickey Rebrushed a lot. It's just that during my roughly 13 hours or so of playtime, my mind kept lingering on the idea of just how amazing the game could be if all of its ideas were executed just that little bit better. It's due to all of both this praise and this criticism that I have decided on a score of 7.5 out of 10 for Epic Mickey Rebrushed. Unless you're a huge fan of 3D platformers, classic Disney, or just under the age of 16, I cannot give my full recommendation on it at full price. But if you wait until it comes down in cost a little, then my recommendation is there if you have a solid week to kill and want a nice, chill experience. That's going to be it for my review, everyone. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.